Men can have orgasms without ejaculating, which means they can do it over and over and over again. But for a lot of men, this is an extremely difficult skill to accomplish. There is one technique that any man can use and start experiencing non-ejaculatory orgasms immediately. It's actually extremely simple. In this video, I'm gonna break down this technique. You're gonna learn exactly how you can implement it and start experiencing non-ejaculatory orgasms right away. Literally 5 minutes from now, you could be having a non-ejaculatory orgasm. All right, let's get into it. I'm Jonathan White, and I've helped thousands of men from around the world learn to master their sexual energy and create an epic life. Make sure you hit subscribe to stay notified when new content like this is released, and make sure you grab a copy of my free ejaculation control ebook through the link in the video description below. It's going to help you take your ejaculation control to the next level. So here is a very, very simple technique that you can use to start having orgasms without ejaculating. And if this is a new concept for you, simply understand that ejaculation and orgasm are two separate processes that occur, and they just happen to be more or less overlapped. In reality, orgasm begins before ejaculation occurs. And with this practice, we're gonna really take advantage of that and sort of biohack your body to be able to experience these orgasms without ejaculating. Now, it's important for me to mention that this is not the core method that I personally use and what I'm usually talking about in non-ejaculatory orgasms, which I've made many, many videos on. I'm talking about a different type of orgasm than what I'm going to present in this video, but I'm sharing this because it is a very useful technique. And again, for some men, it takes time to really rewire the body and nervous system to be able to achieve these more subtle but extremely powerful non-ejaculatory orgasm states I'm talking about. But this technique helps you to start experiencing a type of non-ejaculatory orgasm right away. Now, it is going to be a bit more towards the peak orgasm type of orgasm. So again, use this method as a bit of a training tool to help your system experience a different type of orgasm, but I don't recommend that you make it your primary technique. If you are practicing sexual kung fu and if you are interested in practicing semen retention and having sex without ejaculation, you'll want to transition more into the valley orgasm type of experience, which I'll talk more about later on in this video. Okay, let's talk about the technique. Essentially, what you're going to do is barely hit the point at which the ejaculation would begin. When you start to go into that ejaculatory orgasm, you're actually going to hit that point, and then you're going to completely stop any stimulation. You're going to relax completely. And if you nail it just right, you will have an orgasm and you will not ejaculate. Now, there's a little more nuance to it, but that's essentially the technique. And having a bit of a visual image may help you understand what's happening here. So this is what kind of a graph of what a typical male ejaculatory orgasm looks like. It's often a very sharp climb up in your arousal, your pleasure. This is actually really tension. It's your nervous system starting to fire with tension lodged in the pelvic area. It's the tension response that triggers that ejaculatory spasm, and that's when the orgasm begins. So this is what it looks like for most men. It's very, very sharp. And typically, this is how men bring themselves to orgasm. They try to go for an orgasm, and there's certain things that they do that it increases the intensity of buildup. And we need to understand what's happening here, what's making you push yourself into an ejaculatory orgasm, because we need to do things a bit differently to experience this type of orgasm. So I wrote 3 things here, and the first being speed or intensity. This is going to be the intensity of stimulation. If you're masturbating, this is how intensely you're, fist pumping yourself, or if you're having sex with a partner, how intense the physical stimulation is, or the speed. The second thing is going to be tension. You may or may not notice this, but to ejaculate, you must have tension in the body, specifically in the pelvic floor region. You can notice this next time you're having sex or masturbating. Sometimes it's very subtle, but there's some degree of contraction in the pelvic floor region. Without this, you simply will not ejaculate, which is why a huge component of developing ejaculation control is getting rid of tension and keeping your mind and body relaxed during sex. And the other thing is mind. It's what's happening in your mind. So for example, if you're thinking sexual thoughts, if you're thinking about sexual imagery, if you're thinking about ejaculating, you're thinking about, I want to ejaculate, and you think about that, it pushes you more in that direction. So what men typically do is they intensify stimulation, they tense up their body, especially the pelvic floor, and they think thoughts of like sexual imagery or arousing thoughts, the thought of ejaculating, and all these things pull you towards an ejaculation. We need to understand that because we need to change things up a bit if we want to experience this new dynamic. So I have another graph over here showing a bit more of what it's going to look like as you experience the type of orgasm I'm going to teach you in this video. Notice how this curve, and if you're just listening to this, it's all right, but the build up to this type of orgasm is slower. It's more wave-like. It's less of a sharp upward spike in arousal and pleasure, and more of a slow build and sustained state. So this is very different here. And basically what happens is when you can relax your mind and your body completely as you're coming to this point. So right when you hit this point of orgasm, if in that moment you release any stimulation, you completely relax your mind and body, just go limp, essentially, but not your dick. Don't worry, it'll be hard during this, ideally. Then the orgasm begins and you'll actually bypass ejaculation. It simply will not occur. The most practical instructions will be as follows. Practice this by yourself at first. It's going to be much easier to do this alone because you'll be in full control of the stimulation. So stimulate yourself. Essentially, you'll feel yourself nearing the point of what feels like the familiar ejaculatory orgasm. You'll feel yourself climbing towards that point, and you want to slow down the buildup towards that. You want to think of going into it very, very slowly. Instead of this sharp climb, just diving into it, it's kind of like riding a wave. You want to catch it gradually and slowly and surf on that wave. And as soon as you feel basically right before or around the point when you would hit that ejaculatory trigger, that's when you completely stop. So if you're stimulating yourself, I recommend that you lay down doing this practice. You let go, stop, relax completely. And if you really nail it, you'll have this orgasm build up. Sometimes it will be extremely subtle. If you've gone too far, like if you get too close, you wait a little bit too long, then you will go into an ejaculatory orgasm and you'll simply ejaculate. So my recommendation is that you stop before you think you would need to. Stop a little bit before and then try to stop like a half second or like a quarter second further than you stopped before. Relax completely, notice what you feel. Eventually, you'll likely hit that point where you stop, you relax. You'll feel similar to like when you're going to ejaculate. There's an intense buildup in the genitals, and if you keep breathing, keep relaxing through it, you won't ejaculate. And it can turn into this intense, full body, peak, wavy orgasm experience. So that's essentially the technique. All right, but a few more nuances I want to share here. Remember, all these things are what drive you towards ejaculation. So it's going to be very difficult to do this properly if you're just jackhammering away. So I recommend that your whole session, you stimulate yourself very slowly and mindfully. Don't just make it a mad race for ejaculation, but a very slow building. And especially as you're nearing that edge, you lessen the intensity and slow down the speed, just enough stimulation to keep very, very gradually sustaining or slightly climbing towards that edge. Because if you just jackhammer, it's gonna just push you right over the edge. And the other thing, being aware of tension. You must release all tension in your body, especially your pelvic floor region. There's two cues I'm going to give you that will really help with this. One of the easiest ways to release pelvic floor tension is to imagine that you're trying to urinate. Now, ideally you urinate not by trying to push it out, it's not a good habit to have, but by deeply relaxing your pelvic floor. Next time you go to urinate, pay attention to what's happening. Notice how you relax. And that's the feeling you want to carry over. Obviously, don't do this if you like really have to urinate, but you think of allowing yourself to urinate, that type of engagement of deep relaxation in the pelvic floor, and that will keep your pelvic floor relaxed. Another cue I'm going to give to you is relax your feet as much as you can, like they're just melting, relaxing your pelvic floor as much as you possibly can as you're climbing towards that edge. And as you hit the orgasm, that will help you from having ejaculation. And the engagement of the mind. I do not recommend that you use porn for this practice. I don't recommend that men use porn in general. It has a lot of very destructive effects on your brain chemistry and your mental health. But especially for this practice, it's going to be overstimulating. As far as the quality of your mind, it's okay overall during the session if you're engaging some fantasy, some sexual imagery in your mind to create and maintain some arousal. But as you are going for the orgasm, as you're going for the edge, do not think about sexual thoughts. Let it go completely into body awareness, just feeling your body relax. Feel the pleasure, that vibration that's building in your sexual center. And as you climb towards that orgasmic edge, and once you hit that edge and relax and stop stimulating, let your mind go completely empty, just complete feeling of what's happening in your body. And another thing that's going to really help at this point is when you hit that edge, take a deep breath, just a deep breath in or a deep exhale, a moan. Now it's good to breathe throughout the whole session as well, but especially as you're going for that orgasm, breathing very fully. Taking a deep inhalation can help you to stay in that mode of orgasm without going into ejaculation. So that's essentially it. Now again, it's gonna take some experimentation to really nail the point. You're better off stopping too early and just seeing what it feels like to stop near the point of orgasm, because you're gonna feel this nice pulsation and this pleasure in your genitals from being up high in that realm towards the edge. Because if you go too far, you'll ejaculate and then you're gonna have to wait a while to try again. So my recommendation is to stop a bit early and then go just a tiny bit further if you didn't go far enough. My most intense orgasms I've had using these techniques were pretty similar feeling to an ejaculatory orgasm, but different because the body's relaxed. And I've had the experience to where these orgasmic intense waves move from my genitals up my spine, and my whole body's like, in this state of orgasm. And I've noticed that I really want to tense up. I want to like, and if I've ever done that, it tends to push me in the wrong direction towards ejaculation. Now, something that may happen is that you may experience some fluid coming out. Obviously, if it's full on, fluid shooting out, you've ejaculated and you had an ejaculatory orgasm. It's all right, just training. But I've had some experiences where a little bit of fluid just kind of comes dripping out, but I was still hard, was still fully aroused, there was no sort of refractory period. And I suspect what's happening here is that simply some prostate fluid is leaking out of the penis, and it's something to be concerned about. I think it can actually have benefits, especially as you're practicing semen retention. Something that happens is prostate fluid builds up, and it can cause this tension and even like irritation in the prostate area. So this can help release some of that actually. So if you do this and you have an orgasm and a little bit of fluid drips out, you'll know if it was truly a non-ejaculatory orgasm or not, because if you don't experience a refractory period, if you're still hard, if you're still fully horny and ready to go, congratulations, you had a non-ejaculatory orgasm. And you can implement this during sex as well. It's going to be a bit more difficult because, your partner's movement's not always under your control. So if you're in a position of basically controlling all of the movement, it will be easier to do this type of practice. I have done this during sex and it can be, very pleasurable, but it will be a bit more difficult to really nail this during sex. Something else a lot of men ask me about is using sex toys like fleshlight type devices. And I say whatever, it's totally fine. These can be legitimately valuable training tools because they're a bit more, in some ways, more realistic than your hand. But in other ways, a lot of these are designed to be extremely stimulating, and they're often just far too tight, far too constricting, and it's the equivalent of like death gripping your penis. So if you can find a looser, this reminds me of, I was reading one of the Taoist classical texts of sexology, Yellow Emperor's Classic, and it talks about when a man's training in sexual kung fu, he should first train with a woman who is loose and ugly. I was like, hey, all right, they were just calling it like it was. Too much stimulation goes in the other direction, but if you can find a device that's, or maybe you could customize it a bit, remove the area of stimulation on your frenulum, that will help you with that. So again, remember to very, very slowly, once you're going for the orgasm, completely relax your body. And as soon as you're in that magic spot, you let go of all stimulation. Take a deep breath, relax your body from head to toe as much as you possibly can. And that's it, that's the technique. Now, another thing that's gonna help with this is releasing pelvic floor tension patterns. You can check out some of my pelvic floor stretch routines. These really help you to release these ingrained pelvic floor patterns and will help you experience this non-ejaculatory orgasm. And again, the nuance here that I actually very rarely use this technique these days. I prefer the sexual kung fu methods of essentially what's known as a valley orgasm, where you get into this full body state of orgasm. Because with this method here, you're generating the orgasm completely in your genitals and then trying to remain overall in the parasympathetic nervous system so that it doesn't trigger ejaculation. And it's more of a peak, sharp type of orgasm. Whereas with the other methods I teach, you're essentially generating the orgasm in your entire body. And it creates for me a more sustained state of orgasm. I suspect with even these types of techniques, even though you're not ejaculating, there can still be like a little bit of a Jing loss. I think it's quite minimal compared to ejaculating, but still may be there. So I'm hesitant to use this type of technique too much, but if it's this or ejaculating, this is definitely gonna be far superior, especially if you're doing it every day. But again, it makes a valuable training tool, and the benefit of it is when you just want some sexual pleasure and when you're transitioning into learning to experience these non-ejaculatory orgasms and having sex or self-pleasure without ejaculating, this is a very valuable technique for that. So remember, use self-pleasure, implement it. It may not be perfect the first time, you may accidentally ejaculate. Don't worry about it too much. You'll get better at it as you practice it more and more. And try to do it when you're in a very relaxed state, mentally, physically, emotionally. What I recommend that you do now is watch a video I made explaining more about this other type of non-ejaculatory orgasm that is a bit more full body centric, more of a valley orgasm instead of a peak orgasm. I'll put a link to this video where I explain how non-ejaculatory orgasms go through a different circuit in your nervous system and your energy body. So you learn how to start experiencing, in my opinion, superior type of non-ejaculatory orgasm by checking out that video. All right, let me know how it went in the comments. I'm curious how this technique works for you guys. Again, there can be a bit of learning curve to this, but it's a pretty simple technique. Share this video with a friend who you feel needs to know about the non-ejaculatory orgasm lifestyle. Give this video a like and have a great day, my friend.